everyone. It's Spoilerin time. I'm Tom Merritt, Brian Brushwood here. Brian, we are going to spoil Orange is the New Black episodes 2 and 3, Silicon Valley episode 1, and The Shield season 2 episode 5.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, you want to start? Where do you want to begin with?
Let's start in prison.
Okay.
Because last week we talked about episode 1, and you were more put off than me, but both of us were a little bit like, okay, that was odd, starting off in the strange area. And then we were so excited about Game of Thrones, I kind of rushed us on. So maybe a little bit about how you felt about that episode as you got to episode 2, where you're back in the prison, but no Piper. Right. And then episode 3, where it kind of all started to come back and feel familiar again.
Well, first, let's take it back to the end of last season, because I was confused as I watched the first episode of season 2, because such a huge deal was being made, and like, oh, she's done it now or whatever. And I was like, wait, what happened that was such a big deal? And it took a while to remember that. I'm like, okay, well, I guess, yeah, she did jump that chick. But at the time in that season, at the end of season 1, that didn't seem to me like such an extraordinary big deal that she finally flipped her crap and punched out a girl. Like,
really?
I mean,
that felt like a big deal to me. Like, here's little Piper finally losing control. And not only that, I mean, she didn't just beat up that girl. She knocked her senseless. Like, we weren't sure if that woman was dead or not at the end of that season.
I guess when I think of highlights and big moments from that whole first season, that one didn't even make my top 10. That just seemed like because there had been a lot of dramatic moments. I guess not that big, but at any rate, it certainly didn't seem to me worthy of what appeared to be in the first episode, wiping the slate clean and doing a totally different show as if it's Weeds. You know, like near the end of Weeds, it just got stupid. It's like, God forbid you would do 2 seasons in the same city. Make sure to move. Now you're on the beach. Now you're in Mexico. Now you're, no longer in suburbia or whatever. And I think that's part of what really turned me off is I got a very Weeds reboot. And of course, Genji Cohen, creator of Weeds, we've seen this trick before. And I think I was on guard going into that first episode. So
I can see that I never watched Weeds, so I didn't have that perception of Genji Cohen going into it. I felt like, okay, we wanted to really mess with Piper. So you have her go all the way to Chicago on the plane, and it's all weird. And I'm like, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that they don't tell a prisoner, man, we're transferring you to Chicago for a trial.
I agree.
That just that felt unnecessarily dramatic. I did think that the drama of her and her ex-girlfriend going through that dance of you can't say anything, and then having her turn on her at the end was good. That was the only thing I really liked out of that episode, though.
It was literally the prisoner's dilemma. And she, like, classically suckered in. She went for it and got ratted out on. Agreed with all of that. And plus also it's like I wasn't impressed with the characters. Everything felt like just a wedge, and that whole storyline of this bizarre focus of
the cockroach.
The cockroach, I think the thing was dumb.
I was mildly entertained, but they rode the cockroach too far.
Yeah. Well, and plus also they tried to have a cute it was a real cockroach smuggling operation right after the biggest sucker punch of the whole thing. Like, very likely she's going to double her sentence now. And
it was like sad trombone, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what am I supposed to find this cute? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
then we go to episode 2, which is a tasty flashback, which I thought was really cool. I really liked her flashback story. I did feel like the prison side of that story, even though we see V show up and it's a big, aha moment, it was like half an episode to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's what I realized. Number
one,
we
had no Piper in it, by the way.
Yes. At which point this was an extremely important episode when it made me realize that somehow Piper is my least favorite character in the show. The whole first season, the whole idea is like Piper is our middle-class ambassador to show us how the other half lives or whatever. And you see everything through her eyes. And I understand that now, she's hardened. She's something different. She's comfortable, whatever. She's also the least interesting. She's the same as all the other cast members now, but with the boringest story out of all of them. compared to, I love the fact that they covered Tasty's backstory, and all of a sudden I realized how interesting she was. In moving into the third episode, finding out Crazy Eye's background, all of a sudden Crazy Eye's background way better than Piper, because Crazy Eyes comes from the same world, but has behavioral control issues, is never quite accepted by her, waspy parents, and I loved it. I was back on board. It's all of a sudden it's just female Oz now, and I'm way in.
I have a feeling I felt like episode 2 was kind of rubbing in my face. Here, you're not supposed to think of this as the Piper show anymore. See, we didn't even have Piper. Did you notice we didn't have Piper? And I'm like, yeah, I noticed because you made such a big deal about her story in episode 1. I still enjoyed the story you told, but I don't know. It just felt like they were trying a little too hard with that. And like I said, kind of half an episode when you got to the prison side of things. Totally agree with you on episode 3. In fact, Piper coming back was one of the more predictable, and it wasn't bad, but it was my least favorite part of that episode, because you're right about Crazy Eyes, Suzanne backstory being like, oh yeah, no, that is not what I expected from her.
And I also am intrigued. And yes, I don't know if it's too obvious a play or whatever, but it is a different and a good second act that I could see. I could see this being kind of an Empire Strikes Back of the series, in that I am loving the brewing turf war between V and Red. That is an interesting idea to me. Somebody coming back into the game who's in a world where favors are everything and respect is all that matters or whatever. Fascinated to watch that happen, and I think I'll be engaged just for that. And along the way, I know we're going to get a bunch of other interesting character studies, but for the most part, I like the Lost style storytelling that they've done so far in the last episodes 2 and 3.
I loved that they handled the V-Red thing as these guys, we're going to set you up to think that she's afraid or she's angry or they're enemies, and then when they met, they hugged, and you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute. What's going on here? And then they brought you back around to like, yeah, they hugged, they respect each other, but no, not exactly friends. And so now you're like, what is the dynamic of this relationship? Because it's obviously adversarial, but not as adversarial as a cartoon. That makes it so much more interesting to me. And I think that's one of the things that Orange is the New Black is in danger of with Piper's story, is becoming a cartoon.
Oh, yeah. I think Piper already largely is a cartoon, and I think I don't know that they can make the transition to try to make us experience, the Barksdale, who was the other guy in The Wire,
Avon Barksdale and D'Angelo.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you know, by the way, total side conversation, somebody on Twitter pointed out there's a college football player named D'Angelo Barksdale.
That's amazing. I did see that. So at any rate, I think I'm in on it. I think that if it maintains its voice, episode 1 was too dark. And Piper was too light. It just felt silly. And I didn't buy any of it. But I did buy episodes 2 and 3, partly on the fantastic execution of these character actors. I mean, they're doing a great job of making me sucked in. I'm starting to enjoy. I do enjoy the weird dance that I don't know, the pregnant chick and her guard boyfriend have to do.
The guy with one leg who finally realized, hey, I've got a false leg.
I could put stuff in this leg. Yeah.
Before we move off of this, one question that I've seen, Jenny Jardin posted something today that is an article in the Washington City paper by a former incarcerated woman evaluating Orange is the New Black. And I've seen a couple of these now who say, well, prison isn't really like that. You would never have someone that dominant in the kitchen. You wouldn't have fresh vegetables lying out. You would not have guards not around in a lot of these situations, et cetera, et cetera. Totally buy that. However, I don't look at Orange is the New Black as Oz. I don't look at it as something that's like The Wire trying to show me a little slice of what life might really be like. I feel like it is allegory, storytelling, fantasy, if you will. How important is that for you?
Well, as I've said before, you can take me anywhere. you don't need to justify how we got there. That was my big complaint about Godzilla, was they spent so much time trying to explain to me why I should believe in a radioactive lizard, when what they should have done is been focused on the storytelling elements to have me not care about those things. And in that regard, King Kong did it much better. They're like, who cares? It's a giant, I don't know, it's this island over here. And I bought it, Same thing, the example of the silliest science fiction show I've ever seen has been Men in Black. Bought it 100%. Internal logic, scooped me in, I didn't care. I feel like they're largely doing that. And to me, when you have all these moments where no guards are looking, the idea is out of a full 24-hour day, this is the 2 minutes and 28 seconds that the guards didn't happen to be around.
But also, I think the other point is this is not what prison is like, ladies and gentlemen. This is a fairy tale. And I think that's fair to say. I think it's important to understand. But as long as I know that I'm watching a fairy tale, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about another fairy tale, which I think is almost exactly like real life in some ways, Silicon Valley.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Whereas it took a while for Orange is the New Black Season 1 to ramp up, and Season 2 put me off, but is grabbing me back. Man, oh, man. Did Silicon Valley just pop me right in the nuts from episode 1? I'm deeply in love and enjoying every second of it. Yes, it's got that standard tight storytelling structure where you can kind of smell stuff coming, but this is some of the best Mike Judge and the most Mike Judgiest Mike Judge I've ever seen. And I'm really digging it.
The most impressive part to me is when you're talking about Mike Judge, here's the Beavis and Butthead guy, right? Here's the guy from Office Space. Office Space, obviously taken from personal experience working in an office. Mike Judge is not a young developer who's come up in Silicon Valley, and yet he nails the tropes. He did his homework. He talked to the people who do know these things, and he soaked it up and made it work.
Now, do you have an opinion on the blend between made up stuff and real stuff? Like does it distract you that it takes place at TechCrunch Disrupt and then the other presenter is made up company 6 or whatever?
You know what? Actually, I transitioned us in with this is just like real life. But this is exactly the same thing as what I was talking about, where I know this is a cartoonish world that they've set these characters into that is going to represent the real world. And so the fact that not everything is really going to work the same way as it always does, and things will happen more frequently in this than they actually would is fine. And because of that, I love that they peppered in TechCrunch Disrupt. I love that you get Eric Schmidt just in a background shot, right? In a little bit of B-roll, because it lends that cinema verite to it. And it's fun for those of us who know who those people are to be like, oh crap, Kara Swisher, look at that, whatever. Yeah.
And it doesn't take anything away if you don't. Right.
No, and they've handled that balance well, where it's not like they're really overemphasizing the Eric Schmidt cameo to where people are like, I don't know who that is, feel like they're stupid and shouldn't be watching the show.
I mean, it's so funny that I enjoy it so much, given that the whole first episode is like, here's the plot. The other guys stole their thing, and you know that because they got on stage and showed a giant number that was 2.9, and then they gather and they're like, well, we got to make up another number. Oh, maybe it could be as high as 3.5. Let's get on stage. Oh my God, our number's 4.9. Wow, that was amazing. And it's like the fact that that's literally all the plot and that I can be sucked into it just tells me that I'm in for a good ride with characters and excited about the tropes, and I'm very excited about it.
And I've been at that party, by the way. Not Kid Rock, but I have been at those parties, usually at a trade show, not in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Where they have overpaid to hire someone impressive and nobody showed up and cared.
That was I remember my brother was at E3 because he was staying with an adult friend of mine who was with South Peak Interactive at the time. And this guy's middle-aged, 50-something or whatever. And he's like, oh, well, there's this Sony party, but I only have the one ticket, so I'm going to go. And Jay's like, all right. And so Jay's kind of half asleep when the guy comes back home a few hours later. And he's like, hey, how was the party? He's like, that was all right. There weren't a lot of people there. They had someone, you ever heard of Beck? And then Jay just rolls over and is like, screw you, and goes to bed. So it's like by nature, it's almost always the people who would appreciate the act the least are the ones who are there.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Anything else to add, Silicon Valley?
No,
I can say, having seen parts of the rest of the season, that I think it gets even better.
That's what I hear by all accounts, and very excited about it. We'll see. So let's talk about the Shield, sir.
Yes, episode 5, greenlit. You've been greenlit, Brian.
Oh, this is where like you're marked. They're all like fair game. This guy's going down. Remind me of the story on this one. And this is my favorite thing, is having you retell me.
Here's the top line. Aceveda is working with Mackie and the strike team because there was a tip given about a heroin dealer who was giving heroin to kids for free, and it came from Mackie's old friend who's cleaned up now, right? She's the one who gave up her baby.
Yeah.
But she comes in and is like, I want to be a CI. I'm cleaned up now. So he's like, all right, give me a tip to prove that you can do this. And that was the tip. So they go after the dealers giving the heroin. And it turns out that it's, now I can't remember his name. The guy from Mexico who he burned the face of.
Tuco.
Tuco.
That's pretty
It turns out that it's Cuddy. No,
Avon Barksdale.
It's D'Angelo. What's Armadillo?
Oh, that's right. The guy who burned Ronnie's face.
Yeah, it turns out it's Armadillo behind it. So that's where we get the you've been greenlit situation. And Wagenbach and Wims are working on a case. Actually, it's Wims that's working on the case of a woman whose mother has wandered away, and Wagenbach's not that interested. He's kind of cynical. He's like, well, why is she going to all these different places? And Wims is like, well, she's going to the places she remembers. That's how we'll find her. And he's like, it's a waste of time. Somebody will call her in. Then he ends up putting together a murder that happened based on where she was in the park, because he's like, wait a minute, that's where a never identified body of a child was found at the same time that woman would have been young, and with this other guy we interviewed earlier, and he busts a murder like 50 years later.
That's awesome. So wait, and was she cognizant of where she was going, or she was just going back because she was haunted by that place?
She's got Alzheimer's, so she's just kind of reliving old moments.
Wow, that's awesome.
Now, this is the interesting thing about Wagenbach, is he's been acting a little weird for Wagenbach, and he's super cynical in this episode. Even when he busts the old man, Wims is like, wow, that's really depressing. He's like, nope, just the job. It's just what we do.
Well, and this is largely on the bounce back from that chick playing him, right?
Exactly.
He's guarded and just wants to.
Sorry, Daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big moment.
And that was weird, because we're like, well, I thought Wagenbach was having a good life. Why would that one thing affect him so much? So I assume, and obviously I assume we're going to get more shoes drop regarding Wagenbach's backstory.
Okay. Your impetus and you were sniffing in the right direction. I want to correct you in one word, but then I just realized that it will. I'll tell you, it's not his backstory, but his future story that that things get interesting in.
Gotcha.
It's not that there's a big.
Well, when I say, I guess I shouldn't say backstory, because I'm not thinking flashbacks to his childhood. I just mean like his non-investigative story.
Well, and
his personal life.
Yes. Okay. I anything I say will just take something away from you.
Gotcha.
So we'll talk about it later. Yeah.
But that's it. A lot of Mackie Aceveda interaction, obviously. A lot of questioning about whether Mackie is in control of the strike team. There's the whole subplot of whether he should tell what's his name about the situation with Armadillo. And I can't remember the younger member of the strike team. He suggests on his own, he's like, we can't let that guy live.
You're talking about Lem, or it's Lem, Ronnie, I want Cletus Van Dam is his.
It's not him. It's not Cletus.
Yeah, and then his alias name. Hey, I got a question for you, and I don't think we discussed this. Does it color significantly watching the show, knowing that Michael Jace just got arrested for killing his wife?
Oh, I didn't know that was true. No.
Yeah, Michael Jace is the guy who plays Julian. He earlier, like last month, I think, or maybe this month, got arrested for, he called in the 911.
Well, it will now.
Admitting to being the guy who pulled the trigger. And so,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with his story, which is like he invited his partner to his wedding, and she's like, but you're gay, and what the hell?
Yeah. Maybe I don't know. I don't even want to talk. It's anyway. Well, now that you know that, you'll probably read those articles and you'll tell me whether or not that affects how it is watching.
Yeah, we'll report back next week. I'll let you know.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, excited to keep moving. So next week, what do you say? 3 more episodes on Orange is the New Black, and we're gonna say 3 episodes of Silicon Valley. Got a feeling it might go faster for one or both of us.
All right. Yeah, I don't know if I have time because I've got some other stuff happening at the end of the week, but I can definitely do 3 of each of those for sure, and another Shield.
Okay, all right. Well, then that'll be our game plan for next week. And thanks for everyone for hanging out for a Spoilerin time. Thanks to our patrons who get the episodes in the feed earlier than anyone else. And thanks.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you next week.
Except for you, Gary.
Gary's okay.
Someone's named Gary.
I know. There's probably like 6 patrons named Gary who are like,
screw you, Brian.